Hello class, in this video I'm going to explain about France and assimilation. Okay, so just to do a very quick recap, okay, in this upcoming WA, okay, um, I'm going to cover the topic that's covered includes assimilation, integration, market-based approach, and shared responsibility approach. Each of these approach is represented by one country. You can see there's France, there's Singapore, and we are talking about culture. How do we manage culture in a country? When we talk about social economic diversity, that means the difference in the wealth and income of people. We are going to examine through the issue of healthcare. And in healthcare, we are going to cover these two different approach in the upcoming WA. Okay, and we're going to learn about US and Singapore. In this video, we're going to focus on France. Okay, and just looking at France today, you need to know there are many diverse groups of people in France, many different races. Oops, sorry. Many different groups of races in France. So we're going to see how France manage all these different group of people using the method of assimilation. Okay, you should have with you your set of notes here so that as I go through the slides with you, you can take some notes. Okay, some of the notes here I'm showing here already have some notes taken in class already, so you can double check and write it down if you haven't. Okay, so we're going to focus on assimilation. All right. Okay, let's skip this activity and get straight to the point. Okay, so we're gonna see in France, okay, the way that they manage different culture using this method called assimilation. You can see that in this picture, this woman carrying what looks like a French flag is trying to, it seems to be scolding this person who looks like he's in a religious, could be Muslim, could be he's a Jew. Can't really tell from here, but you can see they don't allow people to wear their religious attire in public. And why is that the case? Okay, because in France, we are going to expect people to assimilate. Okay, or France method of managing people of different races, different religion is to assimilate them. So if you look at this diagram, in France, you can imagine there's a lot of people. The one in red are your French people, and there are different groups like Muslims, Jews, maybe Asians, Africans. And if you want to come to a country, you are expected to become what the majority is. So you're expected to adopt the beliefs of the majority group in the home country, in the host country. That means if you go to France and you need to assimilate, you need to act like French. You need to have similar cultural beliefs and practices that the French people have. So if you look at your notes, okay, this is the main point that you should underline in your notes, okay, and have similar cultural beliefs. You're going to follow the majority group. Okay, so that's what France is doing. Okay, now, and France, so what does this red color look like in France? Just now I said in France, you must follow the cultural belief and practices of France. So what is the majority cultural beliefs and practices in France? Okay, the word that you want to know is laïcité, or in other words, secularism. Okay, in France, if you are a very religious person, okay, you are expected, okay, to not talk about religion openly. Okay, if you look at my notes, you can also mean laicite or secularism basically means you should not be showing off your religion very much in public. You can have a religion, but you shouldn't be very public about it. For example, if you are a Muslim woman, maybe you shouldn't wear a headscarf. If you are Sikh, maybe you shouldn't wear a turban. Even if you are a Christian, you shouldn't be showing off maybe your religion very much by wearing very big Christian accessories, maybe like a very big cross. Okay, so that is France version, the majority culture practices. If you want to come to France, you are expected to become like French, practice and believe in the thinking of laicite or secularism, and eventually everyone will become similar, like in red. Okay, so in France, okay, they even came up with a law that say like, we should not be talking, we should not have a census to compile data about citizens' race, ethnicity, or religion. That means we want to treat everyone kind of like equal. That means um, every French citizen should be only be seen as a French in public. This is the main thing. You should not show your background like your race and religion. Everyone should look like French and be seen as French in public. All right. So you can see there's the secularism law. Okay. You can highlight this maybe. Everyone can only be seen as French in public. Okay. And you must behave like French. All right, so I'll move on a little bit. So why does France have to deal with this problem? Because like many countries today, France have people that comes from all over the world with very different cultures. You can see in your notes somewhere in the second page here. Okay, um, France have millions of people. Okay, about 5 million. Okay, which is about 8% of its population that comes from other parts of the world like Africa, like Algeria and Morocco, as well as other parts of the world. So there are people in France that do not look like French and do not act and behave like French. So that is why France decided I need to have this policy of assimilation. Make sure whoever's living in France or whoever migrated to France will look like one of us, look like the French. And this means if you have a religious attire, you have religious symbols, you should not be displaying it because France believe in secularism or laicite. All right. You can see in many countries, okay, not just in France, for example, in Spain, there's 4% of people who are immigrants, in Portugal, 10%, and so on. So many countries have um, a lot of migrants. Oh, this is the amount of migrants in France. Okay, so you can see, for example, French, they have 43% of a lot of the immigrants in France are from Africa. Okay, 14% of the immigrants in France are from Asia. So France actually have a lot of immigrants, not just from Europe, but from other parts of the world with very different cultures. Okay, so how does France help to assimilate them in to deal with these three areas in education, at the workplace, and to naturalize them? Naturalization you can take down later. Naturalization means to become like a citizen. This is page 3 of your notes. Okay, so later we will cover a little bit more. So let's talk about schools first. Let's talk about education. Okay, hope it's not too confusing between me jumping between the slides. If at any point you need to pause and rewatch certain things, please feel free. Okay, so in France, same thing like the policy of laicite, it is about secular. We don't want people to wear religious attire. We don't want to talk about religion that much. Okay, we want the kids in France to have a strong French identity. Okay, so for example, we want you to be very good in French. So we make sure you learn and speak French like all French people. If you are African that migrated to France, you will go through education. They will make you look like the majority. They will make you look like French. Okay? So you will learn in workplace. It's quite similar. Okay, you want to your workers to learn to speak French and work with other French colleagues at the workplace. Okay, so that you can blend in with the rest of the country as well. All right. Okay, but there's always some sort of problem because in France, there are people who still continue to discriminate and treat all these migrants unfairly. So France tried to, sometimes come up with a solution, this thing called a diversity charter. Okay, this thing is not so important because in this chapter, you need to know and more what is France's method of assimilating its people. All right, so how do we, the sometimes because there are a lot of people that they continue to still the people they are trying to learn French, for example, at the workplace, but sometimes they still continue to not get the jobs or be treated unfairly because people are still kind of, I don't think you are like me. You may speak French, but you are not a real 100% French. So sometimes, even though France are trying their best to assimilate people, there is still sometimes a lot of discrimination. Okay, that is why the government sometimes have to step in and say companies need to, you know, tell everyone that they are actually, in support of a discrimination-free workplace. So this is the diversity charter, but I don't think it's super important. Okay, so the last way France try to assimilate migrants, okay, is through the naturalization process. Naturalization process, think of it as getting your French citizenship. If you want to live in France for a long time, you want to become a French citizen, when you apply, I make sure you learn about France. I make sure you learn about the history of France, life in France, the culture of France, so that immigrants can interact with French people properly. So just like what they did in school, just like what they did in the workplace, when people apply to become a French citizen to try and naturalize. Naturalize means to naturally, slowly become like the citizen. Okay, so they make sure that whoever apply to want to live in France and become a citizen, they make sure they know about France culture very well. Okay, so can interact with French people, can have French beliefs, and have a strong French identity. Okay, so in the example that we discussed in class, okay, in France, unfortunately, a lot of people are not willing to 100% accept the French way of doing things. For example, here you can see there are many religious groups, the Muslim, the Jews, the Christians. They all love their religion and they want to express themselves freely. You can see this madam here wearing a hijab and still wearing a France flag. Okay, she believes she is French, but she wants to still keep her identity as a Muslim and continue to wear maybe their religious attire. So there continues to be a lot of tension and resistance. France wants everyone to give up their religion's attire in public so that everyone will look like French, but not everyone is always willing to follow the policy of assimilation where everyone becomes just one and the same. All right, so there is always a problem. And in class, we also talk about the Sikhs. The Sikhs are a particular group of Indians who believe in a religion called Sikhism. And in Sikhism, one of the main things that is very obvious is the men, they have to wear this turban. And because in France, they happen to be in France, and they came out with this rule that say, everyone must look like French, and this means you cannot wear the turban, you cannot wear the hijab, you cannot wear other religious things. So there were a lot of tension and even protests with France's policy of assimilation. So assimilation, although it's very well intended, I want to make everyone the same so that everyone can interact with one another and blend with one another. Unfortunately, it's a bit more extreme because you look at these blue people, purple, yellow, green, they have their own culture, but they have to give up a lot of their culture to become like the majority. So it's also very demanding on these immigrants. Okay, but that is France's method of assimilation, and this is what you need to know and be able to explain why France choose to do it, and what are some of the good things that can happen, such as being able to interact with the citizens, and what are some possible problems you also need to be aware of them as well. All right, so that's it for this video on France. In the next video, we are going to cover more about Singapore, so you can watch the next video if you want to recap on how Singapore choose to do it differently from France. Instead of assimilation, how does Singapore choose a different method through integration to deal with people of different culture in the society? Okay, every culture, every country, there's diverse culture, many different groups because of migrants and all this. So how does Singapore do it differently? So let's watch the next video for that. All right, until then.